This was just a nice, fun chapter, just to kind of see the camaraderie built between Terry and Toriko, and definitely was one of my favorites.
Toriko, Gorman number 58, Jewel of the Jungle.
Well, hello, my brothers and sisters of the Nerd Nation. I, as always, am Jim, here to bring you another review on the awesome and definitely appetite-inducing, for this chapter at least, tale of Toriko. Our last chapter saw us with kind of the end going, and it's sort of panning out. That's what I picture, like a movie, you know, when they go and they pan out, or a show, you know, before it gets to the end of the episode, and showing us above the canopy of the jungle and the sun beating down. And the top of this triple canopy jungle is what I refer to it as. You can see the actual BB corn. That's where we were kind of left off. But also we know that Toriko and Terry were going to go and climb that tree to see how far the branches went and everything else. So that's where we left off. That's where we pick up, and this is very much it's one of those chapters that just kind of makes you mouth-wateringly hungry. It makes you hungry for something that doesn't exist, ultimately, BB corn. I'm actually, after I'm done with this review, going to eat some popcorn and just sort of just imagine and pretend that it's actual BB corn. However, that's besides the point. So as the chapter starts out, Terry and Toriko are climbing, and it seems like they've been climbing for a while, because Toriko's like, God, we must be hundreds of meters up, right? And everything's referred to as meters, but whether you're on the metric system or you actually use, whether you measure things by feet, it doesn't really matter, because a meter is approximately 3 feet. Nonetheless, though, it is very, very neat to go and just see the drawing and how everything is depicted in this jungle, the background, because there has to be so much detail that goes into the artwork that really I don't know how Mitsutoshi can do it and do them, week in, week out, because the artwork is so detailed. So it definitely must have some very good assistance, because very difficult to do this type of stuff. So anyway, they wind up going and emerging, at the top finally after a while, and Toriko's like, God, this is it's so dense up here and everything like that, and so if you could build a building on top here and all this other stuff. But what really the bottom line is they wind up going and seeing the BB corn in all its glory. Several different what do you call it, shucks of corn, ears of corn. So I can't even remember. I love corn too in the summertime, especially. Oh boy, really good. But they wind up seeing it, and they see this huge one off in the distance that's just like as big as a building, and then there's just some like regular sized ones that are just like the size of Toriko or Terry or whatever. And Toriko goes over and he's like, I'll just grab some of these. I told Tom I'd pick a few ears for him and we'll get going, and he's like, pulling on this thing, and it won't go anywhere, even with Toriko's massive strength. He also went and commented on the fact that this jungle is holding him up like it's nothing, as well as the branches on the way up, and he's 230 kilograms. So he's a heavy dude, right? And but he talks about how basically everything's interwoven and kind of holds each other up, even the thinner branches. Very similar to the framework of like telephone poles, whereas one pole can become a little weakened and can actually sway and move in the wind, but because they're all connected by the wires, they kind of all help to hold each other up. So similar to the strength of a fence over a long period of space, exact same type of philosophy there, But I always like those descriptions, though, so whenever I come across them, I usually wind up talking about them. But anyway, he goes and he's pulling on this thing, and it's cool because at one point they go and they show like kind of a side drawing of him pulling up on it, and then all the roots and where they're entangled in, and he winds up coming to the conclusion that this BB corn must get all its nutrients from like the entirety of the jungle. Like it pretty much just latches onto everything, right, and interweaves with it and what have you, so he can't just pull this thing out. So then he's just like, oh, well, I got it, right, and he's, boom, knife, right, and he's like, ting, and it just barely dents it, and he's like, what, even my knife? And the next thing you know, you're like, you just see, knife, 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 and I'm like, son of a bitch, right? Finally goes and hacks through one of these things, but I mean, he's tired, it looks like he's fatigued from getting just one of these ears of corn. And these things, I guess the fibers and everything are woven together and are so strong, and that's pretty much why he goes and they see these giant like monster birds kind of flying overhead, and he's like, that's why, otherwise everything would be picked clean if these things were actually able to be, able to be easily gotten at, right? But apparently everything about them is difficult to get to. So then they go over and they kind of set their sights on the big one, and this is great. This is just a big tuna, They go over there and they get close to it, and it's just like, oh, and it's sparkling, and the light comes down. It's like, oh, Actually, I think that's the Halo music. But nonetheless, though, the light is coming down, and that's what you feel like, and it's all sparkling and shining, you know. And I really like that effect, too, that they do in this particular manga when they make things, you know, just kind of go and sparkle up and give it a little bit of shine with the shading and background and the absence of light and use of light and color. Very cool stuff. But you know, he says, oh, this thing's got to be 20 stories tall, you know. And then he talks about how the silk strands are supposed to be, are rumored to be equal to as many kernels as there are in the actual ear of corn. And he's like, let's see about the silk strands, Terry. And he goes and he jumps up and grabs onto one of the leaves, you know, that's kind of shuck it to kind of go and peel it down. And Terry goes and jumps in and tries to get it to kind of separate it from that. And as they go and finally wind up working one of the leaves down to go and kind of reveal not even the corn at this point, it's still the silk wrapping, those fiber strands that go around it. And anybody who's ever tried to go and peel corn before, if you don't get that thing cleanly off and you got to try to get through the silk, I mean, it really is like trying to rip. It's difficult. I mean, it's like trying to go and tear through steel, it seems like. So I can only imagine it on this level, you know what I mean, and these strands and everything. They wind up eventually being able to actually get through and expose, of course, the corn, you know. And it's cool because, you know, Toriko is just so excited. He's like, man, these things are so good. I can't wait to eat one. They're like the size of basketballs, you know, and they're actually bigger than that, man. They're like the size. They're huge, you know. And so he's trying to go and get one of these things out and pull on it. And of course he can't. Even the kernels are attached and held in there, you know, very strong. So and then he's like, man, I'll wind up damaging the food, you know, and you don't want to do that if you're Toriko, you know, you're going to go mess up my Snickers bar. But Toriko, you know, doesn't want to damage anything, obviously. So he's like, I can't just use my knife and this and that. And as he kind of moves around a little bit, and he's moving around things, and Terry's kind of dancing and panting. He's hungry. He wants to eat some BB corn. You know, he smells something from the gourmet world. I'm just so going to have me some popcorn. But Toriko goes and gets in behind, you know, some of the kernels, and then actually does, and he goes and he, you know, gears up and does one of his five-fold Kugi punch, and, you know, and just winds up nailing these things, you know, and hoping that he can you know, dislodge a couple of them, right? And then it's so funny because you see a couple of panels go by, and then all of a sudden just like one pops out. And it's like boop, and I'm like, really, all that for one, you know? But then you kind of see the chain reaction in the next couple of panels. It's like boop, you know, and a bunch of them start popping out all over the top of the canopy of the jungle, you know. So, you know, kind of a mission successful. And although there wasn't a lot in the way of action or any type of adversarial fights, this is a fun chapter because you just get to see, number one, you get to see Toriko and a little bit about him and kind of his love for Terry and his affection for him. To go to this jungle and to go and risk, you know, life and limb and whatnot, obviously for a new food because he loves all the gourmet ingredients and foods that are out there, but really to go and serve, you know, the purpose of making sure that Terry is satisfied and can actually eat a good meal, right? So I really enjoyed that. But we wind up having, as the chapter goes to come to a close, you know, he's talking to Terry and he's like, oh yeah, I bet you want to have some popcorn, huh, boy? But we can't, you know, you can't just use a regular fire. I mean, why would you? After all this stuff, you can't just go light up no fire and make no popcorn with the BB corn. No, you got to have a big fire, right? So then he goes and he's like, well, just 1,500 kilometers north of here, which is like a half a continent's travel across. And if you're on a smaller continent, it might be 2 continents, okay? It's far, 1,500 kilometers. We're not talking like a couple of miles. We're talking like a couple hundred, couple thousand. I mean, it's distance, right? But apparently for Toriko and Terry, no big deal. But he's like, he talks about this volcano that's, I think he says the Wool volcano is north of here, and he's talking about how they can go cook the, you know, cook these enormous BB corn, you know, make popcorn out of it, these huge corn kernels. Over the fire, obviously emanating from this Wool volcano. So then it goes and it kind of flashes and it takes us across and actually shows us the final page of the chapter. And it actually shows a guy sitting over here, and I don't think that it's Toriko. We wind up seeing, of course, the, you know, the BB corn and everything else that's there, and Toriko. And then the next thing you know, you kind of get the whole Wool volcano, right? And it goes and it shows us the Wool volcano, and we see sitting up on some of these rocks that look like they're stacked on top of each other the way they are, hanging out over there, we see the shadow of a figure. Now, I don't know, I'm assuming that can't be Toriko because they would show the shadow of Terry as well if it was Toriko. So wherever they're on their way to on this journey, obviously they're going to go and they're going to run into, I'm assuming, some stiff competition or someone else, some other kind of antagonist, you know, unless, of course, it is an ally that's going to be introduced. I don't really know. So, but my chapter question is ultimately, folks, what are your thoughts on just, I guess, just the chapter in itself and not containing much action, but really having some cool stuff as far as, you know, just the camaraderie being built between Terry and Toriko. For me, it was very cool. I enjoyed it. But I really enjoy, too, just seeing some of these foods and then seeing the explanation and the description of why you can't just go and grab you a couple ears of the corn. I think it's thoughtful and inventive, and I want to know what your thoughts are on that. Obviously, we've agreed we like some of the descriptions and things like that. But I guess just the whole BB corn in and of itself in the chapter, what were your thoughts on how everything played out? Did you love it? Did you hate it? Are you indifferent? Leave your answer in the comments down below. Feel free to hit the thumbs up, the like button if you should think that I deserve it, and subscribe if you haven't done so already. We will look forward to catching all of you in the next one. By the Wool Volcano, of course. Nation.
Well, the chapter was entitled Jewel of the Jungle, and I think the Predator is the undisputed fictional king of the jungle. So anyway, go on over to my Facebook and Instagram page and see some more of my drawings.